This is a presentation from abroad, and it's about an experimental form of experiential workshop derived from group relations and inspired by the therapeutic community movements in Europe. It's preparatory to producing a book on this experiment, which has been going now for some 20 years. I'm going to read a little bit about the origins and the thinking behind the workshop, and then Luca Mingarelli will talk a little bit about the actual practicalities of the group and its program. Okay, so I'll start off with the that more general presentation. And what I have to do is to get my script up on the screen. There, right, I've got it. Okay, so I'll go through the script, and it should take about 15 minutes. At Northfield Hospital in Birmingham in the United Kingdom, when Bion ran the rehabilitation ward for soldiers in 1943, soldiers who had broken down, he encouraged the men, indeed he commanded the men, to take part in their own treatments. He refused to see them simply as passive soldiers waiting to be treated by active staff. Instead, he insisted his men had their responsibilities too. In effect, he was commander in this military hospital, pointing out the enemy, and they, the patients, were the soldiers who would pull the trigger. They became patients as soldiers. Now, Tom Main, who had also worked at Northfield Hospital, introduced that kind of focus to civilian psychiatry after the war, describing roles and responsibilities. This is how he described them. Only roles of health or illness are on offer. Staff to be only healthy, knowledgeable, kind, powerful, and active, and patients to be only ill, suffering, ignorant, passive, obedient, and grateful. Especially in mental health, the patient needs to engage as a partner with responsibilities. They should become patients as social persons. Like group relations, experiential conferences, the aim in therapeutic communities is for members to learn from the experience and through the roles they find themselves in. The conferences focus on the group and institutional dynamics, whilst the therapeutic community focuses on individual processes, learning about themselves in groups and institutions. So the therapeutic community considers members have a healthy side. Just a little quote from Freud along these lines: one learns from patients after their recovery that at the time, in some corner of their mind, as they put it, there was a normal person hidden who, like a detached spectator, watched the hubbub of illness go past him. So the mantra in therapeutic communities is to concentrate on the healthy side of the patient. The therapeutic community requires members to retain an ordinary social life as far as possible, even in hospital, taking as much active responsibility as they still can, to protect their ability to continue an active life with others. But mental health institutions so often fail and retreat to merely caring for problems. And patients can collude because a retreat from reality has always tended to be their own self-cure. So mental illness can be exacerbated by the institution itself. Indeed, discussion needs to include how each individual patient can help the institution. In another paper, Tom Main described how the practices of a clinical team can change from really thinking out solutions for common problems, and instead, having retreated from that, they prescribe practices without thinking. And he took the example of a weekend leave, which started by judging with each patient when they became ready to try being at home for a weekend. Later, that became the way things are done. All patients were expected to go home for the weekend as a matter of unthought routine. And he wrote, an idea passed from one person to another by teaching can change its mental residence, moving from the experimental and thinking areas of the ego of one generation into the fixed morality areas, the ego ideal and the superego of the next. And I will call this the hierarchical promotion of ideas. Judgments ossify, become rigid, unthinking, standard practice. They become a manual, so memories of why they are done are forgotten. And reflecting and learning do not happen in such institutions. So it was a small step to think of a workshop where frontline workers could use their own sensitivities to this experiential learning, which we require from our patients in therapeutic communities. For disturbed people, roles and behavior in relationships very often substitute for more ordinary verbal communication. Now, scientific psychiatry tends, unfortunately, to dismiss anything that does not make logical verbal sense. So the expression of disturbance is regarded as noise in the system rather than something to pay attention to. So to reverse that, it seemed worth considering if communication in actions, roles, and behavior could become a useful focus of interest for working with people with severe disturbance. Obstructions to clear expressions are a typical part of severe disturbance. We work with people who have been ejected from family, friends, and social neighborhoods because of their incomprehensible forms of expression. Our culture and personal lives depend so much on calm verbal symbolism. So communication by a more active, direct impact leads to exclusion. In working with more severely disturbed patients, we need to consider how a non-symbolic form of communication circulates. Such communication must be in terms of activities and behaviors that are set up between roles, rather than those verbal interactions at a more thoughtful level. If we implicitly accept a role in relation to others, we construct a narrative. For instance, the roles of passive patient and active carer play out an ordinary medical narrative, which seems completely natural. But Tom Main's example of the weekend leave is an example of the ease that comes from accepting that sort of ritual role, rather than the burden of thought and responsibility. But despite being comfortable for both to lose that burden, it disrupts the task of learning. So the group relations principles of experiential learning led me with an Italian colleague, Enrico Pedriali, to design these learning from action workshops. We wanted to know if it would be helpful for frontline workers to be more accustomed to actions as non-symbolic communication. And also, can a group relations model be effective for that learning? So we made a radical change. Instead of small verbal groups, as in group relations conferences, we used working groups with activities, shopping, cooking, cleaning, and organizing leisure time, with reflective opportunities to understand the implicit communications that occurred in the working relations. The communications we sought to expose are both unconscious and not symbolized. Nevertheless, they are compelling, indeed because they are unconscious. The workshop was set up for participants to experience the processes of role recruitment and the hidden communications behind the narratives that occurred in action. Staff and participants investigate whether these hidden communications can come out of hiding and become available to recognize and reflect on. This investigation is not just an objective experimental one, because the workshops are entirely personal. We assumed that it is not only mental health patients who communicate at this hidden level, but that we all do, including the professional carers from therapeutic communities and psychiatric wards. So patients rely predominantly on these kinds of communications. Their carers need more experience in understanding those communications. Well, success in the workshop is when participants, including staff, go home with some new understanding of implicit communications and their influence on the members of a community, including themselves. Well, my original colleague, Enrico Pedriali, died suddenly 10 years ago. Fortunately, the workshops have been resurrected as a second series through the dedication of Luca Mingarelli here, and together we are preparing a book on this initiative. Now, just to finish, I'd like to give a brief illustration of an incident in an activity group from which learning can come. It's an example of an action that impacted non-verbally and implicitly, but meaningfully. On one occasion, the cooking group was disturbed by an incident when someone dropped a pan of food on the floor and left it for someone else to clear up. There was a recognition by some members working with her in the cooking group that it was not just dropped. There was a general sense that the person, a middle-aged woman, and we can call her Alicia, partly dropped the food on the floor and partly threw it. The incident was ambiguous. What did it mean to her? And what did it mean to her colleagues in the cooking group? Alicia's tray of food on the floor asks questions. Was physically dropping the food a gesture aimed to upset the others? Something to do with the cooking? Or what was going on between the members of the group, perhaps? There is no evidence that she was consciously trying to make an impactful message. Nevertheless, she did impact on the others. Well, this does not have to be answered there and then in the context of the workshop. It's a means of helping the members to see that there is a question that can be asked and considered. The food on the floor could mean various things. Members of the cooking group conveyed there was some impact, the waste, the pointless destruction of a creative effort, and so on. And later reflection of the cooking group made a little progress with what may have been the message. In a brief discussion after the incident, it was recalled that Alicia had proposed a regional dish from her part of Italy, but instead there was a general feeling that something more familiar would be appropriate. Whilst it is possible that Alicia contained some resentment and had delivered it as a mess on the floor, it wasn't a moment to analyze her exactly, but more to illustrate that these questions and communications are possible. Now, back home in a mental health situation, this could be followed up as a specific non-symbolic communication. If it was the case that Alicia had discharged her rivalry or disappointment or whatever into the mess on the floor, then she had also discharged a messy upset into the minds of the other people she was working with. Her state of mind corresponded to the state of the floor, both messy, and thus communicated that state of mind to her colleagues. So the focus can be on the meaning as much as on the action. Thank you. And now I will pass over to Luca and to Giada for their contribution to this presentation.
Thank you, Bob. And I go on just saying that I'm the Luca Mingarelli and past president of Il Nodo Group and owner and founder of therapeutic communities for adolescents in Italy 23 years ago. And just I go on with the talk, and I need Minnie, please, the slide 1. And just LFA is a work in progress that aims to make the therapeutic communities culture dialogue with group relation conference culture, as Bob has said before. However, in LFA, the activities of the groups are more connected with daily life and with the reality, because the work groups have to provide for the survival of the community, meanwhile learning something from the experience. So it's a double task. In this sense, we think that the model of organization we represent in LFA and in a group relation conference have differences. The first is specific. It is based on the model of a therapeutic community organization where people live together, and the main task is to connect with each other, to give meaning to unconscious communications, to facilitate and increase the ability to be in relationship with other people, and to assume responsibility in community life. In a group relation conference, we represent a generic organization of a workplace focused on the issues mainly related to leadership and authority. Both the group relation conferences and LFA conferences are focused on group dynamics and unconscious language, and aim to explore how group dynamics influence and/or contradict the realization of a task. There are some differences, even if the work to provide meaning is common. As we said in the beginning, the LFA was mainly created for TC workers, even if now the participation is open to other professions. The influence of a therapeutic community democratic culture is deliberately very important for us, and in every event you can easily find connections with daily structures of therapeutic community life. In this way, most of the events and experiences that take place in LFA are aimed at producing in the participants an identification with the users of the therapeutic communities, then to experience and better understand perhaps their behavior and feelings related to living in a therapeutic community. Meaning the slide 2, please. The LFA program, as you can see in the slide, shows some events such as the opening plenary, the closing plenary, and the RAGs that are almost completely stackable to those of the group relation conferences. When we spoke about group relation conferences and therapeutic community cultures that we try to make a dialogue, means that, for example, the arrangement of the chairs in the opening plenary and also in the closing plenary is in circulation, as typically occurs in the therapeutic communities. The only difference we make in the arrangement between opening plenary and closing plenary and the other plenaries meetings in the LFA is that in the first ones, the staff chairs are slightly spaced from the others, while in the other meetings, there isn't a formal separation between participants and staff that sit random in the circle. And the slide 3, please. To get the heart of the LFA experience, we will focus more on the peculiar events of this conference, which are the decision-making plenary, we call DMP, the decision-making group, DMG, and the activity group, AG, and the morning and the evening community meetings, MCM and ECM. And I leave to go on to Giada. Giada?
I'm psychiatrist, and I retired in 2016, and I've worked for many years in therapeutic communities with the role of direction. Now I go on. Before describing these events that Luca told, we would like to convey the feeling that a participant may have upon arrival before the official start of LFA. The accommodation has always been basic, now in a hostel, with no single bedrooms and 2 4 members per room. The cost is also lower in comparison to the traditional group relations, which are usually held in 4-star hotels. During the registration, the administrator assigns each participant to the bedrooms that they will share with other unknown participants. It's not possible to choose a roommate, and that reflects the condition of a patient entering a therapeutic community. After and during the registration time, member and staff have a welcome event which offers a transition and aims to allow the participant to enter the new community that's been formed before the official start of the conference. It lasts 1 hour and is made in the dining room. At the welcome event, each participant, as well as the staff members, are invited to bring some traditional food to eat from their own country or Italian regions. This is an informal space where people meet each other and share the regional foods, showing from the start how rich and diverse this experience is. The differences and variety can be clearly observed. This situation is very similar to a facilitating non-traumatic welcoming atmosphere for a client entering a therapeutic community. It's quite different from the welcome in the group relation conference, where the climate is more formal, reflecting a culture of organizational management. In the LFA, this friendly climate does change in the opening plenary. Now we explain the events mentioned above. The decision-making plenary is a powerful plenary event. The participants start to work together and become operational with a view to the organization of the activities. It's similar to the opening plenary of the organizational event of a group relation conference, but the work groups that the participant have to form have real tasks to the essential areas of daily life: cooking, cleaning, and leisure. The decision-making plenary has the following primary task: to explore the decision-making and accountability in setting up the groups that will perform the basic activities self-managed by the participants. The DMP immediately follows the opening plenary and puts participants in contact with the theme of LFA, decision-making and accountability. Think, decide, act. Generally, the associate director of the conference has also the role of a director of activities, and she leads this event, giving the group a simple directive, but linked with the authentic needs of the community to organize itself for the following days. The event is very stressful. Generally, the large group is composed by about 40-45 members, as it has to balance the need to consider the best way to divide into groups, as well as the need for action due to real-time pressure, as the time of the event goes on and the community has to eat together just a few hours later. Over the years, we have observed the various ways of dividing and organizing the work group. The two main issues that the members explore are: the first, their ability to carry out the activity. Should they stay in the same activity where they feel capable all the time, or rotate into the other activities as well? In this case, the desire and idea to perform is prevalent. The second issue, the number and the quality of human relations. How participants interact with people without a fixed group, or develop relations in the same group in order to improve the growth of the group. In this case, the desire is for mutual knowledge and relationships to prevail. It's very interesting how in 2017 and 2018, LFAs, participants decided to change group every time. So no group remained the same during the conferences. This choice generated an uncomfortable situation and a feeling of guilt during the conferences. These kinds of groups seemed very close to the experience of relationship in internet social networks, where one can observe the formation of virtual groups with soft edges. In this case, we can speculate that strongest competition promotes a drive for performance that prevails over the desire to deepen and learn from experience and to observe the process. In this situation, there may be a greater propensity to escape into action. The choices made in the DMP are significant and influence the progress of the whole conference. The next slide, Luca, Congo. The microphone, Luca.
Like this?
Yes.
Okay. After the division in small groups, participants meet themselves in the next event, that is the decision-making group, that has the task, as you can see, to plan activities while exploring the group decision-making, the experience of taking up roles and the interconnections between groups. Generally, each of the 3 groups, cleaning, cooking, and leisure time, is made up of 11 to 14 members plus the consultant. The approach to the decision-making process is always very demanding and filled with anxiety. It can be reached with a desire to have chosen well, or to fulfill staff's or someone's hypothetical expectations, and to affirm personal and or group leadership. During the LFA, the participants in the decision-making events have the opportunity to start to see the balance between fantasy and reality involved in decision-making. We think that an important reflection for people who work in therapeutic communities with persons who have severe mental health difficulties is how much decision-making power are service users supported to exercise, and how much they are helped to be aware that they are exercising it. There are 4 decision-making groups in LFA, although the first of these groups that lasts 45 minutes, the decision-making groups is the shortest event of LFA. It's the moment where members are confronted with the reality of the organization of the activity that will follow, starting from the available and negotiable resources, the ability to explore leadership and followership roles, for example, to be delegated to communicate and propose decision with other groups, or to negotiate with the treasurer of the conference, one of the administrators, for the money needed to buy resources for the activities. Each decision-making group is different in relation to the activity that the group has to plan. In the LFA, having to deal with activities related to daily life quickly puts the decision-making groups at the forefront of the need to interact with the surrounding environment, territory, resources, other groups, and the treasurer. The bank is open during the decision-making and the activities. The idea of introducing money came to me after few editions of the LFA held by another group. I observed the fact that all the food and cleaning materials were bought by the administrator. This was a lost learning opportunity, and it created a dependency relationship between the participants and the staff. There was also a loss of opportunity to explore and enact decision-making processes in the activities, deciding which food to prepare, for example. Moreover, the introduction of money facilitates the exploration of autonomy, opening it to the space of learning and making the LFA more connected with real life. During the decision-making group and the activities, a kind of LFA bank is managed by the administrator, open to the participants that ask for money to support the activities. Every day there is an amount of money available for the participants. Usually the cooking group needs more money than the other 2 activity groups, and they have to talk and connect with the others, so to be able to respect the fixed amount available and to have an understanding of what's happening in the whole system. The participants have the opportunity to go shopping, and this means that the territory in the mind of the LFA enables it to move into the external world and local society. Management of money is an often forgotten issue in many training courses, but we think it is a crucial issue to be explored and to create the conditions to learn how to manage money in a group of people that live together, as in the LFA makes the experience real and concrete. The double task is learning from the experience of living together and learning from the action-doing activities, including being sustainable and not wasting resources. This ecological view is so important due to climate crisis. The role of the consultant is to help the group to reflect on the dynamics that they are involved in and how they affect the decision-making processes. Giada?
Next
slide.
slide. Now we go in the activity group that immediately follow the decision-making group. It has the task to reflect and learn about different modalities of working together as a group in relation to the other subgroups and the whole system, whilst working on daily activities for the community. During the LFA, there are 4 activity times plus 3 community free time and the leave-taking event organized by the leisure group. Consultants are part of the activity groups and actively participate in the activity. During the course of LFA, it often becomes evident that the participants tend to perceive the activity as the good moments, whilst the reflection time are seen as difficult and bad moments, thus opening up the dilemma between thinking and acting. The activities in the LFA are similar to those that participants do with their patients in a therapeutic community. In this, there is a common perception that patients with serious mental illness are seen as healthier when they are active. Therefore, the identification with patient is powerful. There is sometimes an unconscious need to demonstrate that by being healthy, they are able to do the same things that their patients do well. When in action, it's easier to channel and relieve the tension and aggression that is kept under control in other meetings of the conference. So the action can detect these and other feelings that are not fully aware and verbally communicable. Many times we have heard participants say how much they felt under pressure. They also then reflect about how much pressure their patients are subject by the community activities program. This identification process is very important for TC workers to become more aware of their professional roles. LFA promotes learning about the search of the meaning of action that are not only linked to the individual, but to the context that the group and the system and the world is experiencing. When you work with people with severe mental illness, your experience that action can become the main language, mainly due to their difficulty in mentalizing. The ask to reflect whilst working is really not simple. The temptation to run away in doing, as we said, is strong. Generally, close to the end of the activity time, consultants bring the group together for 10 minutes, inviting members to share the learning and reflection on what happened during the activity. This is very important to promote observation and reflection on action, which is the main task of LFA. We think that the opportunity to share short but fresh observation during these 10 minutes can kickstart a process and attention to experiences that would otherwise be taken for granted. The idea is to trigger a process of reflection on experience so that a way of thinking is initiated and we hope will last over time beyond the conference. The DMP and activities and something similar to the organizational event, isn't it? Next slide, Minnie, please. Now we go to the morning and the evening community meetings that has the following task. The morning is to explore the sense of being part of the learning community in the here and now, sharing feelings, expectation, free association, and dreams. The evening has the task to explore the tension and emotion experienced during the activities individually, inside groups, and between groups. There are 2 morning community meetings and 2 evening community meetings. These plenary meetings, the first and the last of the day, provide a sandwich structure that contains the day's activities. They are similar to the community meetings that take place in the therapeutic communities. The purpose of these meetings is to decipher the language of action, especially in the evening community meeting, where participants are invited to reflect on what happened during the day. Ultimately, community meetings are the place to collectively seek and give meaning to what happens in the daily life of TC, where everybody can contribute to the understanding of something about him or herself through contact with others, about the functioning of the group and community life. The morning community meeting opened the second and the third day as a here and now event. The consultants who led this meeting generally invite delegates to share feelings, dreams, and free association connected with that moment. If the morning community meeting is focused on what community members feel in that moment, the evening community meeting is focused on what they felt during the day. Therefore, it's a there and then event. It's the last meeting before the dinner of the first and second day. If we compare these meetings with the large group in group relation conferences, the expression of aggression and competition are very tangible in the larger group, while it's more controlled in the LFA community meetings. We hypothesized that it probably depends on a variety of factors, including the professional role of the participants who are generally working with severe mental health issues, and therefore constantly trying to keep a level of aggression low in their community. Another difference from LG in a group relation is that generally in the LG, there is a delegation of 3 staff members with a consultant function, whereas in the LFA morning and evening community meeting, all the staff are present, but with differentiated roles, 2 of them are leading the event. This is more similar to a TC and linked with the democratic concept of community and its daily life. In 2019, with the presence of the training group, 2 training group members were added to co-lead the community meetings with the designated consultants. Luca?
Yes, just 2 words about the fact that over time LFA has become an international meeting, starting from in the beginning was only for UK and Italian staff members, and in the years we have had staff members from UK, Hungary, USA, Israel, participants from Japan, Greek, Swiss, and so on. And something 2 words about network. So we have enlarged our network of collaboration. So we have had, in addition to another group that was held in the event. So we have had, for example, the CES, GSS, the OFEC Israel, and an association in Italy, and partners from Hungary, UK, and so on. And the slide 9, Minnie. And yes, and the slide 10, because we have to, we hope, the slide 10, the last one, we hope to have given you some elements of reflection and curiosity that will allow us all to open and continue this dialogue. So thank you very much. And I don't know how many participants are there, just to see if we can go on to open the discussion all together, or if we have to divide in groups.
We have 3 wonderful participants, and so in total we have 7. Shall we? What would you like to do?
I think
we might as well go on with the discussion now,
yes,
Luca.
yes, absolutely. After all these words,
yes. Do we need 2 minutes break to let our minds think a little bit?
Sure. Oops.
Sherian.
Yes. Hello,
Hi.
Luca. Hi.
Hello.
Ciao. Ciao, ciao. Well, first, thank you. I know you were talking about hospitals, but the whole time I have a daughter in 6th grade, and I've been looking at things from middle school, and I could see this being applied in education also. So it was just very exciting. I was curious, you know, when you were talking about this seemed really calm, but having worked in a hospital, I could only imagine just getting people in the room to start this morning meeting, containing the association. So I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more, just practically what it's like. I'm even getting a bit nervous just thinking about trying to put this in place at a hospital or even taking it elsewhere.
What do you think, Giada? What about the hospital setting for these sorts of events?
Oh, but I don't know if I have understood well, because American is, but I have in mind that therapeutic communities in Italy are not in hospital, are house in territory normally, her apartment, flat, or single house. I don't know if I have understood well.
You're helping me. So this is done in outpatient, what we call outpatient here. Is that the idea? Okay. Oh, so an IOP. Wow.
We are not in hospital.
Okay. It's outpatient. Okay. I feel like, okay, it feels less stimulating. I could see then how it could work, that somehow the people are stable outside and are coming in. Bob, is this like an IOP maybe? I was talking to Ed. I called you Bob. No.
No, it's a residential setting.
Okay.
Hi, Luca.
Hi, Ed.
Good to see you.
Yes.
I have very interesting to listen to you. Do you have any feedback from the participants in terms of how this experience has changed the way they work?
Yes. I don't know, Bob, if you want to comment, but I really, we are very interested in go on to have a kind of follow-up or something to see how this impact in the really role of the therapeutic community worker. Yeah. So we asked them after immediately after some questionnaire, but then concretely, because they are not thousands, they are something like 40 participants. We have contact to understand how do they have changed something, And it seems that, that in the reality they can really influence sometimes, not always, the group coming back home. But this depends also how was the contract to join in the LFA from the organization that sent the participants and so on.
Oh.
Yes, there is some formal research, but you may be drawing attention to the need for more. But there is some follow-up studies asking people to give an impression of what they have learned and how it has impacted on their work. There is a paper by Barbara Rawlings in a journal called Therapeutic Communities, actually, and which you might want to read, or I can let you have a copy of it if you want. When Luca and I eventually produce our book, there will be some of this from one or two chapters. There will be a chapter on Barbara Rawlings' research and so on.
What changes would you like to see in the people who go to these conferences?
Luca, or?
It's a question. I was thinking about that. It was
yes.
I'm just thinking from the experience of being a participant, it seems that, you know, you have a lot of staff people who are not psychologists and who are, you know, who lead activities and who participate in that therapeutic community, but they don't necessarily, they don't consider themselves experts in the modality. And then for them to experience this, like what I remember the most was like a lot of them now had like a visceral internal experience of what it's like to be a patient, to suddenly show up at the doorstep of a community and have to like obey its rules and to try to figure things out and all that kind of stuff. And like it gave them a ton of empathy to like what it's like to be on that side. And so, and then that just the 10 minutes of processing for them to like be able to step out of it and process, and I think like giving them those skills would be amazing.
Yes, I think it's a difficult thing really to capture, isn't it? Because what we're talking about is a sensitivity to these sorts of hidden connections and contacts, which is very similar to the group relations conferences. And well, perhaps I could throw it back. I mean, what are the follow-up studies on group relations conferences? I know my experience as them took years to develop afterwards, and it's quite difficult to put it into words, isn't it? To that development of a sort of intuitive sensibility to what might be meaningful for the people you are doing things with and connecting with and looking after or fighting with or whatever.
Well, one of the changes that happens from group relations conferences is a shift from experiencing yourself in a set of relationships to experiencing yourself as a part of a system. And I would think some kind of similar response would happen in your conferences as well. One related question is, do the members get mad at the staff?
Members?
You ever been in a conference where they don't?
Never.
Never.
But I'm interested in how it manifests itself in your conferences.
Just I can say something, Ed, because I think that we are not really too much focused on authority and leadership on. So it's a little bit kind of sometimes crash, sometimes connection in between the fact that it's more horizontal in a certain sense experience.
Sure, but they must get mad at you for setting up such a difficult set of tasks.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's right. As in any conference, there's frustrations and difficulties with each other. There are the difficulties of the tasks. I mean, the task is, in my view, extremely difficult, just like a group relations conference, and leads to a great deal of frustration. There's there's a feeling at the end of the conference and people are turned out, and there's that sort of rejection kind of feeling. Perhaps every evening there's that rejection kind of feeling. I mean, these conferences last only 2 or 3 days, and of course one has to see through a screen, as it were, what are some of these sorts of experiences. But yes, I think I would agree with Luca that yes, people do manifest their resentments. And it may be true that there's less of an authority to go and spit at them, and so that it's more diffuse kind of aggression.
What about the dynamics of scapegoating?
What?
I mean, that happens in every therapeutic community that I know of. So it must happen in your conference.
Not so much.
Why not?
From my memory, I don't know why, but it was not so much present. That I want to come back a little bit to your first question, Ed. It was about which is our desire for the learning of the membership. And I have 2 points on that. Very simple. One is that this is my point of view. Maybe Bob and Jada have different point of view, but I think that we need to make them the opportunity to really change the point of view. So to enter in the perspective of the patients and to come back to their home. This is the first. The second is really the learning from action. So to learn the language of unconscious, observing the actions and activity daily life, and so the life. So that is an impossible task. But this is the desire of the learning, from my point of view.
Yeah.
Before being the staff, I was a participant of one of the last LFA made by Bob and Pedriali. The first one edition. And I was my first time director of a therapeutic community. And I thought that I didn't want to go in this workshop because I didn't have to learn about cleaning, cooking. And I had an idea, a strange idea. With that experience, I changed a lot my idea of a therapeutic community. This identification was very, very important for me. And also the educator and the nurse and that of my community that then participated have the same growth by the experience. It's very important because you live this in your own and from the beginning. It's not to go to sleep with another person that you don't know in a room. You don't think this for your patients when they go through the experience in the community, because you think that it's normal. But if you live that experience, you know, and you understand how much important is. and why they have a little fear to have an unknown person near. And so a lot of other things during the workshop opened my mind in a different way.
Anyway, isn't it a traumatic experience to enter in a group relation or in a therapeutic community? So do we have to provide, to create conditions to make it less traumatic than possible in a certain sense?
If I understood you, you also said that action is non-symbolic communication. Did you say that? I thought I heard you say that.
I said that, yes, yes.
But the example you gave is quite symbolic.
It is in a way, yes. It's also very, very direct form of communication. You throw the food on the floor and people are aghast. They have a, and I guess that's what I meant by non-symbolic. I particularly meant non-verbal, because it does make a distinction between group relations, the normal communicating form in group relations, at least overtly, is a verbal one. And the people we see, the more seriously disturbed people in mental health are people who find it very difficult to use sophisticated symbols, and they go around making this sort of impact on each other. So yes, what was your point then? What was your point going to be about non-symbolic?
Well, you've changed the medium of communication. And you're also opening up, I'm not sure I completely understand it, in the 10 minutes at the end of these groups, an exploration of it and the translation of the experience into language.
Yes.
Is that enough time?
Yes, is it enough time? I think it's a good question. Isn't it? You're shaking your head, Giada. Yes.
It's not enough, but it's a start. It's you try to be attention, to have attention of this, and then the community meetings are the time, the meetings where you can speak about these reflections if you want, or you can like in every group relation conferences, you can take to yourself, and then you think about this. But it's important, the message that what do you do that the action can bring meaning, can bring meaning.
Yes, I understand.
Yes, I think that's one of the implications, is that one hopes to be able to take what I'm calling non-symbolic communication, this sort of impact on people, and move it into a verbal form. And yes, I think perhaps one could spend more time, and could have longer conferences. It is 2.5 days, and that's not a long time. There is usually a formal reflective group towards the end, and thinking about how this might be taken back, the sort of examples that might be picked up in the
To answer Ed's question though about whether or not 10 minutes is enough time, I don't think it's enough time, but it was very hard to get, like, I was in one of the activity groups I was in was cooking dinner for everybody. And so when you have a task that has to do with, you know, providing food, basically, it's really hard to even get us to stop for 10 minutes and be reflective. Like, we were just like, no, we can't stop. We're making food. Like, what are you talking about? And so,
And all these people need to eat.
exactly. We need to eat. They're all depending on us. You know, there's all that stuff. So when the task feels like it's life or death, even though it's not, it just felt very serious. And I remember our consultant following us around going, do you think we could be reflective about this? People shouting at him, being like, no!
Yes.
That's the way I feel when I cook dinner too.
Katie asked in the chat, have you tried this LFA outside of Italy? Luca.
Oh, Luca
Yes.
replied to me and saying Japan.
Yeah.
Yes, with Bobby, we have been in 2017 in Japan, and then in 2019, it was really a very, very interesting and strong experience also, I can say. And not easy at all, because also the cultural, the differences on the cultural defenses of every place in the world.
Yeah.
So it's really an extreme experience to have been invited there and to make this kind of experience. And they want to repeat, so they have wanted to repeat. So we have been also in 2019. I don't know what to say about that, but it seems also that also now in Israel, they would, before the COVID time, it was another era, but they asked to make an exploration there. Also in UK, John Diamond, the Mulberry Bush School, they asked me to, and I think also someone from USA has asked to think about that, how to and so it's really something that has this concretely, and that you don't need, if you don't make a good hypothesis, you can live the same, but if you don't eat, maybe you can become angry.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right that the way people impact on each other in non-verbal ways depends a great deal on the culture and the cultural assumptions, expectations, and so on that everybody observes in that particular culture. Again, I might say that there is a chapter in our forthcoming book from Japan where they do focus on some of this, but also I think you know Heather Churchill. She's writing from the point of view of the United States and issues of belonging, particularly that are slightly different from UK and Europe. And there is a chapter from Hungary as well, where it's not just a different language, a very different, not just different culture, very different language, isn't it? So I think this again is a whole area of study which is complex and.
How do you manage the different languages in the same conference?
It has been a kind of journey from the beginning to now, because in the beginning there was Bob and Janet and a wonderful past nurse of Castle Hospital, and they were leading that, and so there was a translator, a woman, wonderful, and so it was simply the translation. But then when it became a more international, so having a lot of participants from Japan, I don't know, from everywhere, and also in the staff, we decided to try to use the resources available in the system. So because it's a learning from action, so we have to try to understand the language of the movement, not verbal. And both aim, because it also don't waste resources, don't waste money, and give the LFA available also to the participants that works as nurses and the other roles in the therapeutic community that have less money than the clinical director and so on. So it was something also in this sense.
I think it's interesting because, you know, if you're interested in non-verbal communication, then you might say, let's get rid of all interpreters. That's an extreme position, but it's very interesting in Japan, where I went with various preconceptions about how formal and stiff Japanese people are in the way they communicate with each other. But sitting in meetings, being in activity groups with them, and not understanding what they're saying to each other, one got a very much stronger impression of the kind of atmosphere they created, the vibrations that were going on between them, which one wouldn't notice so much if one was listening to their words.
I know exactly what you mean. This last weekend was on the staff of a conference in the Russian language, where I understood nothing. And
Yes.
I ended up in the large group singing to them. So you can do without language.
Is that why your name is
Still in Russian.
Sorry?
Your name is still in Russian.
Oh.
It's good. So I think building on this, I'm really intrigued by this. I was chatting, I guess I'm going to tell somebody in the chat about what it would be like even in a group relations conference for the staff. You know, we're going to have dinner to make that the activity where, you know, the administrators get it ready, but who's going to clean up? Something where we also have this reflective piece. I thought that would be comical, and also we might learn something. So that's one part in terms of where my mind went. The other thing I wanted to know is, what are some of the themes that are, I think we asked this before, but for instance, with the banking, what are some themes that you see come up around money that maybe relate to class? I don't know, but I'm really curious. Oh, that fire looks lovely, Luca. That's tempting. Okay.
Yes.
Bob or Giada or Luca?
Yes, well, yes. Money is increasingly important, isn't it? At least in Western culture, maybe in all cultures. And Luca's very hot on, yes, money for shopping, for the food. I think there was in some of the most of the early workshops, the cooking group did its own shopping, and maybe the leisure activities did some shopping as well. I don't know, what do you think, Luca, about the role of money as this, well, money speaks, doesn't it? It speaks very strongly in our culture today.
Yeah, it was my question in a moment was, why do we have as staff to provide food, the material food for them? We have to provide another level of food in a certain sense. So it was something very, I didn't have the why. Why do we have to provide for them and to cook, to have cook prepared for them in the beginning, and but we have to give them the opportunity to be active in understanding what does it mean to be autonomous in the life. So and also the opening to the territory. So in a certain sense, usually in the group relation conferences, we are closed in a house, in the surrounding, and just to open to the reality and to have them the opportunity to manage money, to interconnect with the other groups, so to explore as in an organizational, even the interconnection in between the subsystems. It seems to me a really concrete opportunity to do that, and I think it is growing as LFA is growing in a certain sense. We are learning from the experience of the whole system of the every conference, and so the money, I think it's really give us the opportunity to think to the meaning, but it's a double task in a certain sense, to think to the meaning, the movement, the dynamics that generate the money, that is something so real everywhere, but also to really be concrete, because in the therapeutic community we need to eat and to have clean places, and so it seems to me a kind of hybrid, kind of something that connect different levels, maybe more complicated because it's really too much short, the event, from my point of view, but this put it available for people that have not so much money.
Yeah.
I wonder
Cooking.
if, oh.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
You know, with the online, with everything being online, and so this maybe being more challenging, have you all thought about ways to translate this into kind of an online, I'm just thinking about the ways the dialogues committee feels like an LFA, in kind of, okay, you're gonna like create these links for this, you know, thing and invite speakers, and now we're gonna process some of like who took on what role, and has there been any conversation around, you know, creating some sort of experiential online that could be like
Yes, isn't that interesting, Minnie? Because yes, there are experiments, aren't there, with ordinary group relations conferences happening online. But I don't know, Luca, has anybody thought how you could get an activity group together online that works with working relationships together? I suppose it would, well, I don't know. What sort of activity could be engaged together with a group of people online, which is not a verbal activity? Hey, well, there's something for the AKRI's Institute to think about. There's something for us to think about, isn't it, Luca? Have you thought about that at all?
Yes, because we have planned a LFA that was not possible to do because of the COVID situation. And so we have thought if do it online or not, but we have decided so far to don't do it online.
Yes. How are you thinking it could be done online? How can you, have groups that organize activities that can be done together?
You can do it through music, through a program where you have the different tracks and somebody creates like a bass line and then somebody adds, because a lot of musicians right now during the pandemic have been collaborating across countries and making music together. Yeah. So it's nonverbal, but you might have to recruit some music therapists that are interested in group dynamics, that have cross-disciplinary to kind of think about that piece. But yeah, I think it could be done. I think it could be kind of cool. It would be novel and an experiment, but you know, it could be a way to innovate.
maybe meaning I'm not so much innovative, because I don't think so far it's possible to do something similar, because I've seen the learning in 100 people in relationship to do things together and to go out shopping and to live together in the same place and to wash or clean or to play together in it. So it's really the fundamental daily life. And so live together without living together, it seems to me an impossible task. But maybe I'm wrong and I'm not so much innovative.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think that the strong of LFA is that the activities are real, are concrete. They are near too near with the real life, and so it will be very different. Perhaps we could do, but it will be different.
I have another question, which may be a bit more difficult. I understand that you don't focus on authority, but there is a distinction between the members of the conference and the staff. And do the food makers make food for the staff as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
And do the staff
Yes.
have separate? And do the staff have separate meetings?
The
Yes.
staff has a separate table.
So there's an
But-
authority distinction.
Yes, there is. The issue of authority is present, but it's not the focus. It's always present from my point of view in every situation of the life. But anyway, it's present.
In my fantasy, for whatever that's worth, and I'm a member and I'm running around making food for this damn staff who follow me around and ask me to think about things and then go off and eat at their separate tables. I would have feelings about that.
Yes.
You were saying about whether or not the members get mad at the staff? Were you talking about that earlier? There's a way.
Just this is a very interesting question, Ed, because there is a chapter in the book that speaks about the challenge of especially of the staff members, the consultants that are in the activities. So for them is the distance, the closeness. It's really that they cut carrots together with the participants. We are there. So it's really
the staff is part of these dinner groups.
In the activities, yes. So we change the vertical horizontal. In the activities, we are completely horizontal in a certain sense. Also, if in the end of the activity, usually we take 10 minutes and maybe we can make a kind of stop and say, we have maybe to reflect on what's going on, what's happening in the system, in the group, in this hour together. And so, but they are, because I was director, so, but the consultants are more facilitating. And so the challenge is how to stay in the role.
Yes.
That is very, very complicated. Very, very complicated.
Yes, this was another important learn for me because to see one member staff work actively with us in the activities was very meaningful for me, because it's important to the possibility to be near the patients, to do the same things without lose your role.
Yeah.
It's very important, this.
It's very difficult also.
Very difficult.
Very difficult, yes. So it's a continuous change, the horizontal and vertical. And so the challenge also for the staff is so strong.
I see.
But also for the participants, they can see immediately that we can change it. Sometimes we lose the role also. We are not perfect. Just.
It's very intensive.
It's so short. It's kind of concentrated, like we have the concentrated of tomato in Italy. It's concentrated. You use a little few, and then the issue is the time to digest this and to apply this to our own role and therapeutic communities and so on. But in the last edition, there were also people from a leader of a yacht, a lot of people, a manager from a bank, or I don't remember, but people interested also from, not only from mental health services, workers, and because maybe also because we introduced the money. We introduced something very, very material in a certain sense, but without losing the connection with the meaning of what's going on.
I can't wait to read the book.
You will write something.
Right. Well, it may be out by the end of the year. We are expecting something from you for the book.
As soon as I see everything you've written, you will get something.
This has been very useful to connect a little bit more.
Yes, for me too. For me too.
Yes.
My animals are calling me, so I have to leave. Thank you very much for this.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Shall we finish that? Bye
Wonderful.
then. Thank you for
Bye-bye.
coming.